Hi, I'm Clare Richardson. I'm Head of Conservation at the Courtauld, and I'd really like to warmly welcome you to the GoGreen Academy here at the Courtauld in London. All right, so I just want to introduce a little bit about the GoGreen project to you all today, and tell you a bit about the challenges that we try to address in this work. It's been a 4-year project which is coming to an end this September. And these were the challenges that we identified as things that we wanted to address. One of the key things was the lack of a unanimous green definition in the field, which you'll hear more about, and a desire to address the use of materials and methods that are harmful to the environment, particularly the use of toxic or polluting materials, and the impact of conservation work on energy consumption and the environment. And this is all in the context of the EU Green Deal and a desire to kind of transform into a more sustainable profession. So in order to address these challenges, we set out to define parameters for what constitutes green conservation with the aim of creating sector-wide standards, to work on preventive conservation practices and decision-making, to bring in green thinking, to develop and introduce new methods and materials that are inspired both by historical recipes but also new green chemistry practices, to create a prototype digital web app, which you're going to hear more about this morning, and to really empower conservation professionals to make this big shift in thinking. And it is a massive consortium effort, and I just wanted to show here all the different organisations that are involved in Go Green and contribute to this different research. The work was organised using this excellent flow diagram, and you can see that we were thinking about lots of different ways that preventive conservation and interventive conservation interact, how to assess the impacts of different treatment methods, how this could feed into a web app that talks about making decisions in greener conservation. And then finally, this was all going to be disseminated into the profession via green education, which is the primary reason that we're here today. And of course, running alongside that, there's been project coordination and management, and also a programme of communication and dissemination. And exploitation, which sounds a bit terrible, but it means exploiting these exciting results and getting the most out of them. Okay, so I just asked everyone who was leading a work package to give me one slide to tell me about what they've been doing. So this is my attempt to represent my colleagues and the work that we've done. So in work package 1, this is really about managing the project. And so these are all the different things that came into that. But I think an important aspect to highlight is that there was a really important need to work closely with the European Commission, to consult, to really communicate what we were doing, what we were trying to achieve, and make sure that the work was really impactful outside of the project, and to involve all the different partners that we worked with, and also thinking about how we do this in an ethical way, and also thinking about how we do this in a sustainable way. So even in the management of the project, we were thinking about sustainability as well, which I think was a really kind of cool thing to have done. In green preventive conservation, there were really exciting work done with monitoring object behaviour, and so this is kind of long-term monitoring of objects to look at strain in different environmental conditions, and this informed HERI-E, which you'll hear more about, which is a really useful tool which allows you to appraise risk to objects. These slides from Dave telling us about projects to look at the energy density of museums, so looking at the carbon footprint of museums, and then also to develop damage functions, so looking at how objects respond and are damaged in different environmental conditions. And these new damage functions were developed for steel and glass, and existing knowledge for stone was really fleshed out. Alongside this work was a kind of methods of identifying unstable glass, so working out which glass objects would need the tightest controls and which would need broader control. In work package 3, which was all about green cleaning, we have this amazing slide summarising everything, but there was using essential oils, yeast, different natural materials to inspire cleaning solutions, looking at different natural solvents, but also looking at brand new materials, including non-woven polylan tissues, which are an amazing method of cleaning, which minimise the amount of solvent that you need to use on any given surface. Work package 4 was focused on green stabilisation. This was about protective treatments for glass. It was one of the research areas, and this has resulted in patented solutions, including this one, which I won't pretend to properly understand, but I can tell you that it was super exciting. And then methods for stabilisation of copper, again using natural materials and iron. And this was drawing on different historical ideas and also new ideas. Work package 5 had the task of assessing all the different methods that we developed and looking at low-tech and high-tech methods for assessing both cleaning and stabilisation. And some of these involved using ultraviolet light in a really sophisticated way. And in fact, we got to test out these amazing glasses that Momoko made with different lenses inside, so that we could really see if different filters enabled us to see more in UV. And there were also much more complex ideas and methodologies developed for both spectral imaging and different tomography techniques. I'm not going to say too much about work package 6 because that is coming up soon in the development of a web app to aid decision making. But all of these, all of the work to kind of define what green conservation is and to think about greener conservation treatment fed into that app, and recommendations and things that you can explore through the app. Work package 8 was about communication, dissemination and exploitation. And Gwen is going to talk to you this morning about defining green for conservation and the green conservation definition. But this work, as with much of the project, has really engaged the broadest possible selection of stakeholders, has invited input from the profession. So we're not coming up with a definition of green by ourselves for conservation, but we're really asking the profession, what do you think green means in the context of our work? Another thing that we were able to do is we were able to link up and team up with other funded projects as part of a green cluster. And this was a really amazing opportunity to really come together and then leverage that joint power of being able to speak about our work. And there was a strategic meeting on green conservation in Belgium, where we really kind of talked about how can we develop policy to help green conservation in the cultural heritage sector move forward. At this meeting, there was a wide attendance. It was also online and the presentations were recorded. And one of the important outcomes of that was thinking about a white paper to really promote the kind of decisions about how to influence policy. So those of you who can count will have noticed that I missed out an important work package in my running through of the work packages. And of course, there is work package 7 on green education. And the fruits of that work package are what we're hoping to demonstrate to you today in the various module demonstrations. Our aims in doing this work of green conservation education were to accelerate the routes for our research straight into practice. And so to bring this GoGreen research straight into the classroom. We wanted to create educational materials that were as flexible as possible so they could be applied to lots of different contexts. So in conservation, conservation science, in ongoing professional development, for example. And we developed, as a result, 4 modules, and they pull from the research in these different work packages. And these modules are the things that you're going to have a chance to experience today and tomorrow. So in the development process of these modules, we already had titles, thankfully, and then we went on to develop high-level aims for each module. What do we want to convey? What's our kind of mission statement? And then starting from those aims, we moved into learning outcomes, and then planned how could those outcomes be achieved in a 10-week course. And I think that's 10 weeks of a couple of hours a week thinking about what are we trying to achieve. Finally, we moved into a class level planning and then testing and gathering feedback. And so part of what we're going to ask you today is for more feedback. So please do give feedback on your module demonstrations. And then of course we want to share these materials with as many conservation educators as possible. We used a co-creative and iterative process. So we went out to the profession to ask what's needed. We tested, we kind of invited feedback at all possible opportunities. And these are some of the different stakeholders that we asked about, what do you need? Conservation is a very interdisciplinary field. So obviously we have practitioners and also conservation science. And it was really important to us that we kind of drew out from these different interdisciplinary contexts what was really most useful for educational purposes. And we did this through a series of different meetings. So we had a meeting in Paris where we sort of done the work. We worked with focus groups to refine the work, and then we used these pilot sessions. And here we all are in Paris. And this was a key milestone in the work of WP7. It brought together a really diverse group of educators and conservation practitioners. And we also had an opportunity to hear about work already being done in the field to introduce green thinking in an educational context. And we were really inspired by those examples of best practice. And then we did this group work where we tried to draft our module outlines together. So if we look at our module structure for each of the GoGreen modules, we wanted to start in Paris with the mission statement and learning goals. So in Paris, we asked groups to identify in a single sentence what the module should be aiming for. And then we asked participants to name the main goal of the module and maybe some subsidiary goals, and maybe 4 learning outcomes, what students should know at the end. So we started with this in-person development workshop, and we were asking our participants to develop this mission statement. And it prompted a lot of debate and discussion, as you might imagine. In some cases, just agreeing the mission statement took the whole session. But it was really great because it brought in this real plurality of voices, and it goes to show that people's understanding of what does it mean to say leadership in green conservation can be different. And we really wanted to hear all those different ideas and try to synthesize it into a single mission statement. But that's kind of was an interesting learning point from the idea of kind of working in this co-creative way, was that actually it takes quite a lot of time to agree consensus. So our ambitions that we might also have got aims and outcomes sorted in those sessions was not always realized. So after we moved from that first phase of a mission statement and thinking about goals and outcomes, we moved into focus group work. And this was a bit quicker to come to consensus, and we fixed upon the idea of 10 sessions and 2 hours, and that started to make it feel real, which was really important. I think it's really hard to imagine you're already dreaming of your imaginary student in an imaginary scenario, and if you also have an imaginary length of session and an imaginary number of sessions, it becomes surprisingly difficult to move into anything concrete. In the focus group, we tried to move into developing a module template. So we were looking for something that would be flexible, scalable, customizable, and it would move move from the aims into a kind of bigger overview of what the module would deliver. And having got that, we then moved into classes. So what in each module, how many classes and what would be the title of those classes. And we ended up with something that looked a bit like this. So this was the kind of module outline. And you can see that we have some broad themes and topics. We have descriptions of what each class should be delivering and then trying to link it to the learning outcomes. So here you can see your themes, topics. So at each stage we became increasingly granular, and so the final stage was to imagine what some of the 2-hour sessions would be and then come up with kind of objectives for each of those sessions. So we had this kind of high level objectives for the module, but we moved into class level objectives, what would be delivered. And so then we came up with session templates. So we've gone from module templates to a session level template. And each session has a short abstract, objectives, outline of content, and an idea of the methodology for delivering it. And each of these sessions were then assigned to 1 or 2 people to develop, and the other members of the focus groups acted as reviewers. So this is what is kind of available now to share, is these session level templates, module level templates. They're not classes ready to go. You'd obviously need to adapt to your context and to your students, but it gives you an idea of, hopefully it's a bit of a shortcut to being able to introduce this in your own teaching. As part of workshops like today and tomorrow, and we've also tried other sessions in different contexts, we've tried piloting specific sessions with students, and we've evaluated whether they were engaging, whether they were clear, and we've asked for feedback, which helps us to keep on improving. So at the Courtauld, we had a role play session where we tried to link together green advocacy with preventive conservation, and it was kind of like a murder mystery party. Everyone had to play different roles, and we staged an argument about how to run an exhibition loan scenario in a sustainable way. And we asked students afterwards, what was one key thing that you learned from this session? And we got some really interesting results. And we, again, did some surveys about how could we improve the session. So our next steps are to continue piloting the modules for further feedback and refinement. We'll do a bit of that today, but also to start to disseminate the materials that we have already created to a wider conservation and heritage science community. And so I just want to draw your attention to this link, and hopefully it's matching QR code, which will take you to our website where you can download these materials freely available. And I hope that you can find ways to introduce them into your teaching, and also to let us know how that goes. Obviously, this is, as you've heard, a very co-creative process, and lots of different people were involved in creating the educational materials. So I want to thank, first of all, my fellow work package leaders for their slides to highlight their input into this presentation. Thank you to all of the different participants who helped to develop the educational modules, and thank all the workshop leaders who have tested out sessions with students. And I want to also just acknowledge my colleague Austin Nevin, who inspired this work, and just to say that a little bit at the end. Okay, thank you very much.